if your like entire like argument is that we should take this as true because the Old and New Testament say that it is true, then like we can say that Harry Potter is true because we have 8 books that say that it is true.
So this young college student has a great point, and he's challenging the validity of the Bible. And what you're going to see in this conversation is that it turns into, how do you verify anything? How do you verify truth in the world? And so it's a very important conversation.
So like if it's just the book, the only thing that stands behind the book is the fact that we believe that this book is true. It doesn't mean that it is true. It just means that we believe that it is so.
Very good. So thanks for asking the question. Why do I trust the New Testament Gospels to give me accurate historical information about Jesus of Nazareth? Great question. Because I have tests that I use on any document that claims to be historical.
Okay.
And I would love to hear your tests after I give you my tests.
Okay.
My tests are 4 in number. Internal consistency, meaning by that, are there contradictions within the text that point to massive confusion on the part of the author? No, when you read the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you have uniform and divergent details, which I love. Not contradicting each other, but different books containing different details, which smacks of authenticity on the part of the authors. I like that. Second test, literary style. Is the literary style of the document once upon a time in the land of Nod, or is the literary style at this time in this place with these people around, Jesus said this and did that? That is the literary style of the Gospels, historical narrative, eyewitness reportage. Third test, archaeology. Are we talking about Jesus floating a boat out to the island of Atlantis? No, sir. We're talking about Bethlehem, Nazareth, Sea of Galilee, Jerusalem, Rome. Are we talking about Mickey Mouse, Elmer Fudd and his cronies? No. We're talking about Pontius Pilate, Herod Agrippa, Tiberius Caesar, Caiaphas, Ananias, historically verifiable individuals. Fourth test. Yeah, but the Gospels are almost 2,000 years old. What gives us any degree of certainty that we really have what the eyewitnesses wrote? Today, the Gospels that we have in English are based on over 5,000 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript dated from the 2nd through the 10th century AD, all agreeing to an infinitesimal degree. The evidence is overwhelming.
So your evidence is internal consistency. So if I wrote a story with the correct tone, referencing real places, using without contradiction, and I got a whole bunch of my good friends to like write other stories about it, 200 years from now, that's going to be whatever. So those are your tests?
Those 4 tests: internal consistency, literary style, archaeological evidence, and manuscript evidence.
Okay, so what specific manuscripts like are we talking about?
The ones I just mentioned, over
Okay,
5,000 Greek manuscripts.
Okay, so these theoretical manuscripts that may exist say that Jesus rose from the dead because they said that, like, manuscripts of what? What are they manuscripting?
Manuscripts
History
of Matthew,
or...
Mark, Luke, and John.
Okay,
see, the
so
question is,
they're
do we have the eyewitness recounts kept accurately for today?
Okay, so we know that they kept them accurately because
Yeah.
they didn't just write a whole bunch of stories.
No, that's not the point I'm making.
Okay, so
The
please...
point I'm making is, how do we know 2,000 years after Christ that we have an accurate historical document? That was your question that I'm answering.
Yes.
We're not getting off on all these tangents. You asked a very specific question. I'm answering it very specifically.
And I am very specifically taking down each one of your qualifications for why that is the case.
Literary style,
Right.
internal consistency,
Very right.
archaeology, and manuscript evidence. Those are my 4 tests.
Okay, so internal consistency, right? If we have internal consistency within any story, that would make it like a really good story. Is that correct? So if there's no contradictions inherent with the story, then like you have a great story. That's like the qualification of being a good story. Because if you read something and like, wow, this really contradicts what they said in the first book or whatever, you're like, this story sucks. So like, I could say probably that most good literature is internally consistent, regardless of its like historical accuracy or whatever. Number 2, for your archaeological is a hugely interpretive process. So like we could just find this and say, oh man, these hieroglyphs must mean this. but like that's not true. They didn't mean that. We think that they mean that because of our interpretation of what happened in history. We don't know that for sure. And I've been on your manuscript. Whenever you have these 5,000 manuscripts of whatever, it's not like they're copyright laws back then. What if they're just recounting a good story from the time? Like they're like, oh man, this would be great if this happened. So it's retelling of the same stories.
Okay, so now what are the tests that you use to determine historical reliability?
I don't. I think that most history probably isn't that reliable, which is why I'm always skeptical of things that I read. I don't believe them because I feel like the degree to which I can be certain is not enough for me to believe them.
Fair enough. Which means you don't know with any degree of certainty that George Washington was the first president of the United States.
Yeah.
You don't know that Napoleon fought the Battle of Waterloo.
Probably did. I can't say for any degree of certainty that I know that.
You don't know that there was a Nazi Holocaust.
Let's see. Okay. And then, okay.
How do you know
so
they're not lying?
Okay. So that is true, but the lying part could easily go for the lying argument could easily go for you. Number two, it's not just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then a whole bunch of people told a really cool story. It's all the accounts of the soldiers that were there and all these other people that were actually there that can actually give us recordings from the time period. And then, secondarily, I think that we often like fetishize the Bible to that degree. It's like, oh no, nobody can be wrong about this. This is so right. How can you dare like disagree with that? And I think that whenever we go about trying to test the validity of whether or not this is actually a historical document or not, is not critical enough. Because we say that there's 5,000 manuscripts, but we have not actually read these manuscripts. We don't know if these manuscripts are just like rehashing of the cool story that Matthew and the bros wrote.
It is my privilege to debate Muslim professors on university campuses.
Great.
I can promise you I would never look into the face of a Muslim and say, you know, the evidence is Muhammad never lived.
I mean, but
That is so naive. That is so dishonest intellectually.
Okay.
The overwhelming evidence is Muhammad lived. He was a real space-time person, and we have a very accurate presentation of Muhammad's beliefs in the Quran, which has been carefully preserved over the past 1,500 years.
Okay, number one, ad hominem attacks are like really low. Number two, especially with regards to calling me like naive. So let's not resort to that.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I said I debate
Implication
Muslim
and rhetoric
professors.
count. Number two.
And if I were to say to a Muslim professor or any Muslim, I'm sorry, you don't have enough evidence that Muhammad really lived.
now you're
that
saying
shows
that
a
I
disrespect for all of the evidence that indeed Muhammad was an historical person.
Okay,
but
so
for
now
them it works though.
Pardon?
But for Muslim people, it works for them. So
No, that is not.
no.
That is
Okay,
not the
but
argument of my Muslim friends.
Okay, so you're saying that I can't disagree with you because
didn't
it'd
say
be
that
disrespectful
once.
to
I
disagree with
said
you?
that you have not produced yet for me a better set of tests that you use to determine historicity. And what I've heard you say instead was, you haven't answered my question about what are your tests that you use to determine historicity. Instead, you've said, I don't think we can know history. Fine. So I'm telling you, I totally disagree with you. I think historical knowledge is legitimate and valid.
So this skeptic college student is not the only one who don't have their own values to replace God with. This is a common thing between Christians and atheist conversations. I want to show you an example where Pastor Jeff Durbin asked an atheist scholar, he says, what is morally wrong with eating babies? You know, so this is just a snippet of the conversation. I'm going to make a whole nother video covering this particular debate. And so it's going to appear on the screen right now, and then you'll also see it at the end. So make sure to hit the like button so that this gets to more people, and also so that YouTube recommends it to you so you can see more of this content. Thank you. See you in the next one.
Okay, Bruce, you still haven't answered the question. What's wrong with eating babies?
The speakers do have
The
I
speakers do
can't
have
answer
the
that
option to
question,
defer
Jeff.
to their partners.
What's wrong with it is that you actually support it because you read the Bible. This is the insanity of belief, that you believe something that it's okay to do because God tells you to do it. Do you believe in killing
Bruce,
babies?
where in the Bible does God say to eat babies?
Babies?
The reason
I don't think it does.
The reason
It
we
doesn't.
don't
To kill babies, yes, in
Okay.
many verses.
All right, go ahead.
to skip a thousand reasons, there is one very simple reason why we don't eat babies, and it's because we will no longer be. That would be the end of humanity if we all thought it was a good idea.
From
to
an
eat babies.
atheistic perspective, what's
No,
wrong
no,
with
from,
that?
there is no atheistic perspective.
You're assuming value and dignity in these human beings that you say we ought to protect.
No,
Now,
no,
as a
no, I said-
Christian, real fast, as a
Yeah.
Christian, I can justify that claim of human value and dignity in babies, but you're assuming it. I'm asking you to provide a justification as to why it's wrong to eat babies from an atheistic perspective.
Okay.
Give me a
So-
justification.
Great. So three things. There is no atheistic perspective. Being an atheist
Are you an
says-
atheist?
Yes. There is no atheistic perspective.
Are you giving me your perspective?
I apologize. Every single time
Would you like
the
to
middle
have
of my
him
sentence
answer
keeps interrupting the
question,
beginning
please,
of
Jeff?
yours.
Please
but-
be considerate and let him answer
This
the
is
question.
my time to ask questions, your
Yes,
time
but
to
you
answer.
have to give the time to him
Okay.
to answer the question.
Go ahead, please.
I said nothing about values. I put it so simply as we do not eat babies because we would be no longer. If we
And what's
wish-
wrong with that from an atheistic perspective? That's what I've asked you a second time now.
So I'll answer it this time, yes?
Okay.
Okay, good. There's no atheistic perspective. The fact that I do not believe one's claim that there is a supernatural God of any sort
Yes.
does not guide my morals in any way.
So your beliefs, your worldview does not guide your living
My
in the
worldview,
world.
yes. The fact that I'm not convinced that any supernatural being exists has nothing to do with it.
Okay, we've evolved in a purposeless, cosmically purposeless universe. And now here we have babies. And you're suggesting that we should do good to these babies and not violate them and hurt them. Okay?
Yes, yes.
In a universe where there is no God, no ultimate standard of justice, I'm asking you to provide me an intelligible answer besides just preference. Because I don't want to, or we would die.
I didn't give preference.
That provides the preconditions necessary for intelligibility to make that claim mean something. Your claim is that there is no God, no ultimate purpose, meaning, governance,
I
in the
did not
universe.
claim there's no God.
So you're saying, as an atheist, you accept God's existence now?
No, I'm not convinced that one exists. That's not a
Okay.
claim that he does
So-
not.